If you're going to do something in 2020, it better be cloud native. It has to be, because you're making a decision for the next 5 or 7 years. Make sure it's a strong one that you can live with for a long time. Welcome, everybody. It's great to have you here. Join us for this great event. Today marks a couple of big events for the Cassandra community as well as for DataStax. We just introduced our Astra product, which is Apache Cassandra as a service. We did a nice blog. There's some really awesome write-ups by very influential reporters out there. You should please take a look at it. I'll briefly touch on it towards the end. In addition, we are introducing our Accelerate, a virtual Accelerate conference. We're doing it Netflix style. We're going to do it. Our first season starts today. We are dropping 4 episodes. Right after this, you'll hear from Ed, our Chief Product Officer, and he has a great panel. You're going to hear a lot about cloud and being cloud native. You're going to also hear from Chelsea and Dell. It's a great use case and a success story in how they have implemented Apache Cassandra. And then you're going to hear Patrick talk to a bunch of folks about Kubernetes and Cassandra. We actually think of them as peanut butter and jelly. So we're going to have some fun with that, and I think hopefully you'll enjoy all of them. So let's get started. But before we get started on talking about data-driven enterprises, I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you to all the Apache Cassandra committers who've been working over the last decade to create this phenomenal technology. We really appreciate all the hard work that you've put in. We know it takes a lot to create technology as great as what you've put together that very large apps and companies run on. So thank you. Thank you very much for the users of Apache Cassandra, because if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have a vibrant community. So we appreciate the fact that you take the technology and implement it and make large enterprises successful. And lastly, enterprises, right? These are DataStax customers, as well as folks who are just using Apache Cassandra. We appreciate the fact that you bet your business on us, on this technology, on this community. It really makes us go. You give us an opportunity every day to do what we really love doing, which is solve hard problems for you. So we really, really appreciate that. I love this slide. It is always the slide that I want to hug because it is what makes us get up in the morning to do what we do. So let's get started. We're going to talk a little bit about data-driven enterprises. We're going to talk a little bit about the business frameworks that go with data-driven enterprises, and then we'll talk a little bit about technology investments. I'm going to try to make sure that this is as commercial free as possible. This is by our customers, for our customers. These are things that we've learned as we talk to our enterprises, we talk to users, and so we're trying to bring our learnings to how you can actually accelerate your journey. Sometimes I can't help myself, and I will talk a little bit about DataStax, but this is for you, by you. And so hopefully you get a lot of benefit from this and try to implement some of these things as you go forward. So imagine you're in 2030, right? You're at 2030 and you look at the last 20 years. You're going to start thinking a little bit about, wow, I've been going through a lot of business transformations. And you think about digital and say, it was interesting. My enterprise started out on the digital transformation journey. And you're still on it, by the way, but it was essentially let me go off and build an app on the side. And very quickly you learned that building an app on the side is not enough. You need to do a lot more, right? You need to go off and say, the app becomes the way you communicate with your consumers and you communicate with your customers. So your digital transformation journey continues. You think about data the same way, right? I mean, you've been doing data-based applications for a long time, right? Since computing started, but are you really data-driven? And then lastly, you think about AI-enabled enterprises. There's a lot of discussion about that. We know it's the 4th industrial revolution. We know it'll change every industry, just like digital did, just like data-driven did. But is your AI-driven focus more than 4 data scientists and a dog working on the side? Is it mainstream? Because for your AI-enabled enterprise to really be enabled, data data is the fuel, right? So we're going to talk a lot about data-driven enterprises because that's where you are today and where you need to go off and accelerate your journey. So what is a data-driven enterprise, right? You've had data, you've done a lot with it, but are you? Are you really using data to actually create innovative new business models? Or are you just using it to make small optimizations? Is data become something that people agree on across multiple functions? Is data something that people are passionate about? Are they really creating business models and they're collaborating? Is it part of your culture? Right? Because the data-driven enterprises that we see that are successful think about data a critical part about everything they do. They are passionate about it. Interestingly enough, it is only a means to an end. The really successful data-driven enterprises ask very few questions, but they ask them again and again and again. And the two questions that we found that enterprises spend a lot of time asking, the successful ones, are how do we fundamentally change the value proposition for our customers? Not 3% better, not 2% better. How do we fundamentally change the value proposition? And the second thing is how do they deliver new value propositions to their customers above and beyond what they've already always seen? And I think that is how data-driven enterprises really, really succeed. They ask hard questions, right? And they drive that on a regular basis. So what are a couple of examples of companies who have been successful? The first one is Netflix. We've all heard about Netflix, but just think about their journey, right? They started out by saying they were in the DVD business. They said they're going to have a delivery platform, an on-demand delivery platform. Great. But they took the on-demand delivery platform and then they went off and made it a discovery platform, right? You could now discover things. You could not just get the shows you wanted, but you could discover the shows. They didn't stop there. They took the discovery platform and created a recommendation platform because they found that there was so much information, there were so many shows, they had to start recommending it and making it easier for their users. But they didn't stop there, right? What they did was they went off and said, it's not good enough to go from discovery to recommendation. We are now going to take all the data we have of all the individuals and try to create shows and try to go into the content creation business. Wow, they continue to evolve. They continue to take their value proposition, create and shift it, create fundamentally new value propositions, and they're taking us on their journey with us. Data has always been a very critical part of Netflix's success, and I think they will continue to innovate in this industry for a long, long time to come. The second one is interesting. If you look at this quote, we want to get to know our customers better than any other company in the space. If we had a large audience here, I would ask you, how many people, raise your hand on how many people know this, who put this quote. And I think a large portion of you would get it wrong. The quote is from Mike Sievert. He's the CEO of T-Mobile. And T-Mobile has made data part of everything they do. They've fundamentally changed how the wireless industry works, or how telcos work, or how service providers work. They started out by saying, let's take Netflix and make it part of every T-Mobile subscription. Wow, that's awesome. They didn't stop there. They now have T-Mobile Tuesday. T-Mobile Tuesday is where they bring great rebates and values and coupons to your best brands, and every consumer gets that. They're delivering value to me beyond saying, here's a wireless network, here are really good smartphones. They're trying to make things better for me. Cody Sanford, who's the CIO there, and Mike, they continue to do a great job of completely disrupting the industry, all focused on a simple question. How do I create new value for propositions for my customers? Very interesting. I think we're going to continue to see some great things for them moving forward. So what does the journey of a data-driven enterprise look like, right? I mean, there are some business opportunities, there are some technology opportunities, or a different way to put it, there are business challenges, there are technology challenges. So let's start talking a little bit about what the business opportunities and challenges could be. The best way to frame the discussion is to actually come up with a framework where you can actually fit these challenges and opportunities into. We picked one that we use at DataStax, and many of our customers use it. It's very simple. It's about strategy. It's about operations, about people, right? You may have a framework of your own. Use the one you have, and you can start thinking about this in those particular pieces. So if you think about the challenges you're going to have as you get on this journey, you're going to see that there are strategic challenges, there are operational challenges, and there are people challenges. So let's start going through each one of them and actually have a short discussion about them. Interesting enough, the quote on the right is from a very large company that actually has data in the center of everything they do. But look at how unclear the data strategy actually is. Right? They have a lot of data. They have 1 terabyte of data every day, and they still don't know what to do with it. The quote on the left, on the other hand, is somebody that says, I know exactly what to do with the data I'm generating. I know how to ingest it. I know how to make something of it. I know how to take data and convert it to information that is used to make decisions. So the first thing we have to do when we get on this data-driven enterprise journey is to make sure our strategy is crisp and clear, and not just in the leadership team, not just the executive team, but it should be as clear as possible to every individual in the enterprise. That's when you know you have a data-driven enterprise. You're going to have operational challenges, right? We all hate operational silos. We do understand why you need functional silos and why it's important. We all have tips and tricks on how to get rid of them, right? We sometimes don't have org charts. We sometimes don't have titles. The mistake that we make is we continue to ship our org charts to our customers. Our customers don't actually care how we're organized. Our consumers don't care. What they care about is, are they getting the value that they want from us? So I think it's really important to remind everybody inside the enterprise through metrics and many other things that you should be looking at a common set of data. And it's not about the function that you report to. It is about the data that is going to create the new business value, create the new business model, create the new value proposition. That's what matters. And then legacy processes, again, hard, right? It got us there, right? How do we just get rid of it? Because with every process, actually we have a person involved with it, right? And so the best way I've found to think about legacy processes is to actually think about the opportunity cost of legacy processes, right? You think about the fact that if you actually had $1 and you couldn't break it, would you spend it just reinventing the legacy process, or would you come up with something completely new? So every time you think about the legacy process, think about the opportunity cost of having it, because it might be holding you back. And then lastly, it's always about people, right? People are the ones that take our strategy, take our metrics, and actually execute on them. 50% of all folks in enterprises have to be reskilled. 70% of all new jobs have to have a technology component to it. Reskilling is something that is a responsibility of enterprises. It's not just something that an individual contributor does. You have to make sure that you as an enterprise actually help each one of your folks, each one of your employees, each one of your team members with the reskilling part. It is something that we should feel responsible for as we go through this journey of business transformation. And lastly, the resistance to change. We all know that there are going to be some people who are smart and execute. There are people who are not smart enough, who cannot execute. But the people in the middle are the ones that we should focus on, because there are people who sound really smart, but they don't execute. Those are the ones that actually create inertia. They create inertia in your momentum towards becoming a business-driven enterprise. You need to find a way to make sure that they start behaving more like owners and actually drive your data-driven strategy, right? Because you need them to be part of the journey, not just agree superficially, but do something about it. So as you think about the strategy, the operations, and the people aspects, please realize it's not just doing it once and moving on. The data-driven enterprises that we interact with do this on a regular basis. They iterate again and again and again. They're very vigilant about doing this and making sure it's an iterative process. Again, not just for the leadership team, not just for the data team, but something that is discussed and becomes part of everything the enterprise does. So you have the business challenges, you have a path to face them, and every enterprise will have a different way to dealing with it. The next piece is, let's talk about the technology side. So we know that you have a large technology stack that covers a lot of different pieces. For the purpose of this discussion, we're going to focus on the data infrastructure. Obviously, you have applications, you have analytics, you have operations, and you have integrations. So we're going to talk a little bit about NoSQL. And we think the technology framework, as you think about NoSQL, comes in three different parts. You should think about scale out, you should think about open source, and you should think about cloud native. It's really interesting during these times, as I talk to retailers in the last 4-6 weeks during this COVID-19 era, they are actually enterprises who are having Black Friday every day, right? We all know that retailers, their best day of business is Black Friday. There are many, many, many retailers who are having Black Friday every day. And if they had not focused on scale out technology, they wouldn't have been able to deal with the e-commerce revenue spike that they're getting. So scale out is something you have to think about. As you get on the technology side, you have to think about it from day one. You may look at say, you know what, our business is not that big, our data needs are not that big. If you don't think about scale out from day one, you're going to be in trouble. The second thing is you have to think about this from an open source perspective. And open source has to be driven by a foundation. The Linux Foundation, the Apache Software Foundation, because we find the collaboration in a foundation works really well. Users, committers, enterprises, everybody gets a chance to interact. And the last thing is, if you're going to do something in 2020, it better be cloud native. Right? It has to be, because you're making a decision for the next 5 or 7 years. Make sure it's a strong one that you can live with for a long time to come. Our perspective on this has been simple. We think eventual consistency as a global scale is a big part of scale out. We think Apache Cassandra works really well. It's a great community. It's vibrant. It's getting more and more energized as we go along. And then obviously Kubernetes is what cloud native, a big part of what cloud native is. How would you not do that, right? You have to go off and make this happen. And so peanut butter and jelly, Cassandra and Kubernetes, that's how we think about it. Our strategy is simple. The Datastax strategy is simple. It's hybrid database as a service. Hybrid, we think we need to give you the opportunity to run on multiple clouds. Cloud native needs to be run on premise. We need to give you a control plane. Your data can reside where it does, but we should be able to manage it across different clouds. We're heading in that direction. You're going to see a lot more from us coming soon. Database as a service or database, it's going to be really important for developers to use, right? Easy to use is going to be really important. GraphQL, REST, you're going to see us innovate a lot. Database gateways, many other different things are going to make us that we are actually doing, that we're making today for developers. And then lastly, as a service, we have to make it easy for you to operate. And so going into a no ops world is going to be really, really, really important. And so we're very proud to actually introduce Astra today, and you're going to see us do great things with it as we move forward. So what are the key takeaways, right? Data-driven enterprises ask hard questions on how they should redefine and create new value propositions. They continuously focus on the business challenges and the technology issues that need to solve. It is not something they do once, because at the end of the day, they have to execute. They have to execute with a sense of urgency. Because if you do not, you're going to have a problem as an enterprise. Because the companies that are going to innovate, the companies that are going to dominate, no matter what industry you're in, are the ones that create new innovative business models, new innovative value propositions that are based on data. So innovate, execute, and drive forward as quickly as you can to become a data-driven enterprise. Thank you. And now Francisca is going to take some questions from Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and I'll try to answer as many of them as I possibly can.
Thank you so much, Chet. Here's the first question, and it comes from Melissa via LinkedIn. Melissa wants to know, what advice do you have for companies who are lagging behind in their digital transformation now, as we all navigate COVID-19?
That's a great question. It's something I get a chance to talk to CIOs very often on a weekly basis, quite a few of them. And what I've found is that, having a strategy, right, with or without COVID, having a point of view is really important, right? And really thinking through, and actually assessing where your business is based on what your strategy is, as well as where your people are, right? And then driving towards it. The one fundamental thing that makes a difference is having a successful project, right? Pointing to something that is not academic, but pointing to something that says, here's what we did in a small pocket of our enterprise by having something that is truly data-driven. I think success breeds success and it creates a ton of momentum. So in this day and age, the more you can get done, but just to be clear, you have to have examples, but you need a strategy as well, because you cannot just make this happen in a silo. It is something that the enterprise needs to start believing in holistically. But don't underestimate the value of having success stories also. So having a strategy and having success stories, I think the two S's will make a big difference.
Got it. All right, next question. And this question comes from Arby. How would you describe a data-driven enterprise where the company has less than 500 employees and less than $1 billion in revenue per year?
It's interesting. We are one of those, right? And so we actually have a data-driven enterprise. We think of ourselves as on the journey to be a data-driven enterprise. And so we've created a group called Data Ops. Denise drives it, a great data scientist, and she's putting all the technology pieces together for us to have metrics and data and have one version of truth, right, that everybody can look at. And we're not just focusing on the supply chain, which is how do we create product, or the demand chain on how do we sell product, right? We're talking about the entire value chain and making sure that data is actually something that we see across the value chain. Right? It's a journey that we're on. And my take is no matter how small the company is, ideally you do it when you start on day one, right? Or how big the company is, i.e. how much you have to transform. Having a clear strategy on the value of data and making sure you drive it so that you have one version of truth across the enterprise is going to become important. Because let's be clear, right? We're in the world of SaaS, right? And so you have data that sits in many, many different applications, silos, and you've got to make sure that there's one version of reality across that everybody sees. And I think having a data-driven approach, you must need that going forward. So we are implementing it on a regular basis. My take is it doesn't apply to a size of company. I think you'd start it when you're 2 people and a dog. You can start it when you're 300,000 people. I think it's important that you just get started.
Nice. All right, up next is a question from Ram. Can you provide specific examples of which companies do an admirable job about providing equitable value for the data they collect?
This is it's an interesting, Rob, it's a really interesting question. I think there's a lot of research being done, many universities, quite a few professors that we interact with, where data is going to be thought about as an asset class, right? How do you carry it on your balance sheet? How can you think about data in that perspective, right? And obviously with everything from a privacy point of view and things like that. But data is going to become the fuel for everything we do. And so how do you think about data, not just enabling or driving a data-driven enterprise and the revenue cycle you have now or the new ones you create, but how does it something that you value above and beyond the bottom line and the top line, right? So it's a very interesting dynamic. There's a lot of work being done. Obviously, it takes a lot of time, but I think at the end of the day, it is about serving consumers. It is about serving your customers, right? How do you fundamentally change the way they look at you? We talked about Netflix. We talked about T-Mobile. There are many more, right? The second thing is, as you serve them, what does it do to your top line and to your bottom line? Because it must have business results. But the third piece is, how does it fundamentally become of something of value, not just for those two parts about the new value propositions and the P&L, but is it something that you can actually classify and go off and use as part of the P&L? And so there's a lot of work being done, but we'll see where we land with it. Great question.
Got it. Okay, next question. What do you think is the biggest mistake an organization can make as they take the steps to become a data-driven enterprise?
And we see a lot of companies actually do this. I think we're learning, right, as we go through digital transformations and we do data-driven enterprises now. I think it's going to sound repetitious, but I think it's really important. I think you need a clear strategy, but I think you need successful projects, right? Picking something that's mission critical, right? That is really important. Not an innovative project on the side, right? I was having a conversation with a CIO of a very large company who's been very successful in transforming his organization over the last 20 years, right? He's done a phenomenal job. And what they've decided is that their data-driven enterprise is going to start from their most critical app. Their most critical app. It's not something on the side. It is their crown jewel. And they've started out by saying eventual consistency is important at a global scale. They've said they wanted open source and very clearly are going towards a cloud-native world. But as you get on this, you've got to make sure you have the right mission critical app, you have the right people, and then you define the right milestones to actually prove success, because it is a long journey. And making sure the milestones reinforce the progress you're making, the momentum you have, becomes really important. I cannot tell you about how many enterprises miss having a clear strategy and successful projects or a successful platform over time. It is a combination of those two that actually make the journey very rewarding going forward. So you need a crisp and clear strategy. You need to make sure you clear the path, no organizational silos, no legacy processes, things like that. And you get the right people to work on it, people with the right skills. Hopefully you've reskilled them, and then make sure you have a successful project. And then as you have a successful project, make sure you talk a lot about it, because that's what makes a difference. Great question. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Many enterprises want to be a data-driven enterprise and are working to implement both the business and technology side. But one of the biggest struggles are organizational silos. Can you talk a little bit more about that, or give advice on how someone can overcome silos within a larger enterprise?
I've had a chance to talk to a lot of CIOs, CEOs, and boards about digital transformation over the last decade. And there's some similarities, right? Because this is part of, these are transformations that every enterprise is going through. Let's become digital, let's become data-driven. I think this needs to be something that is board-driven. And I think that's already happening, but I don't think it's happening consistently. I think boards, just like they look at cybersecurity, they just look at digital transformation strategies. I think they're now shifting towards having data-driven approaches, right? And I think that needs to happen, because once it starts from the board, then it actually is something that CEOs care about and the C-suite cares about. And when they start caring about it, they come up with initiatives that are not just one function, right? It's the chief data officer is driving it across multiple functions. So I do believe that the best way to change the organizational silo part, right? You come from two parts. One is you start with projects that are obviously important for the enterprise, right? Mission critical projects. You don't see functions. You think about serving the customer and serving the consumer. I think you start there. And the second thing is, as we talked about, you have to use those guiding principles, the technology framework I talked about. It has to be true open source with the foundation, has to be scale out, right? Eventual consistency, kinds of things at a global scale. And the last thing is, it has to be cloud native. But if you can make sure it's a business initiative, it's a mission critical business initiative from the board, from the C-suite, from the CEO, I think that cuts through organizational boundaries and make sure you have the right technology to actually help you get there. It is something that we are starting to talk to a lot of boards about, and I think you're going to see this happen again and again and again. Thank you. Great question.
Great. Thank you so much, Chet.
Thank you very much, folks. Take care.